One of the most pressing historical questions that we need to take up and answer today is this. How did modern atheism emerge in the West in the 19th century? And what implications does it have for the way in which we collectively live in the 21st century? I recently finished a book by the historian James Turner called Without God, Without Creed: The Origins of Unbelief in America. And I'd like to share just a little bit of that argument with you. James Turner, like Michael Buckley, a wonderful theologian in his day, is concerned to take up the question, how did it happen that in the West, where belief in God was fundamentally obvious or self-evident, certainly during the medieval period and up even into the 16th century, how did that indubitable and profound belief, situated as it was within uh, an intelligible cosmos, and beyond which is a transcendent, benevolent being, start to crumble or be called into question? By my lights, this is the question that needs to be asked because I think that we're living through a period of profound and unacknowledged nihilism. Profound and unacknowledged because there are various ways in which we seem to turn away from the very fact of this question. We have a predominant entertainment industry or culture industry that allows us to consume content one after the other. We have a version of total work, which upholds the calling as the reason for our being here. So we have a production side argument. But once you start to look through these, you find the void in modernity. How did we get here? I'm only going to share a little bit of the epilogue with you from James Turner's Without God, Without Creed. In fact, he brings up 3 points or 3 patterns right near the end of the book. He calls them humanizing trends. In fact, he thinks that there are 3 domains uh, or 3 realms in which this humanizing trend begins to unfold most profoundly, most obviously. The first is nature, the second, morality, and the third, I'll call it reverence or mystery. Concerning the first, he states, that is the pertaining to nature. The study of nature yielded no longer evidence of God, but simply knowledge of nature. He's speaking of the 19th century, the latter half of the 19th century. He goes on, another side of God, the moral governor who satisfied the need for good order and the longing for a better, was identified with purely human activities and aspirations. So we'll take up that second point in a moment, but it's the first one that I want to dwell on here a little bit, and that is that uh, by his lights, by Turner's lights, in the 17th century and the 18th centuries, we're still seeing the attempt to justify the existence of God through our best account of nature. Through, for example, design or intelligent design. Slowly but surely, those arguments that are meant to secure inferentially the existence of God as being the great architect, so to speak, start to be assailed by new arguments. Geology seems to unfold longer than, let's say, a literalist account of the Bible, that therefore, over the course of millions of years, obviously Darwin's accounts of the um, contingent emergence of design in organisms starts to call into question the need for an intelligent designer and so forth. Uh, So what we see then by the end of the 19th century, and certainly up as common sense throughout the course of the 20th century, is the belief that science is not only concerned with the study of nature, as obviously it is, but rather the further implication, which is that any notion of transcendence is more or less off the table. I think this is quite problematic. And it's been problematic in the case of our own lives as it pertains to meaning. So now we're not dealing with the relationship between the natural and the supernatural, or the relationship between immanence and transcendence. We're simply interested in immanence, or a completely naturalistic account of physical phenomena. So the second point that Turner wants to bring out at the end of the book is that the need for a moral governor to legislate morality through divine edict starts to fall apart. In other words, there starts to be challenges felt here by unbelievers, specifically by agnostics mentioned in the book. And what's very interesting is that the Victorian morality takes up the cause of humanitarianism, that is, of the betterment of human welfare, particularly in a material sense or a physical sense. I think that theme of humanitarianism has been carried forward surely into the 20th and 21st centuries. For example, take the tech scene. Speaking as charitably as possible, just for a moment, a technologist is interested in creating maximum impact in such a way that it betters or improves or enhances or empowers humankind as a whole. I'm not saying that's an argument is completely cogent. I'm just saying that is a commonly held view today, and it owes much to the Enlightenment period and to the Victorian period that came before this recent techno-optimism, shall we say. Let's just back up one moment here. When I speak of humanitarianism, I'm mainly interested in the fact that our lives seem to be governed by the desire to better other human beings, not by an account according to which there's a divine being in whose light acting in a, for example, Christianly manner matters. This is a horizontal conception, therefore, a horizontal conception of the meaning of my life. I am here in order to improve the lives of others. How can I serve you? How can I help you? How can I help, for example, as many as possible? Or if I've become a utilitarian rather, how do I maximize the utility for the most? I don't know if I'm being clear enough here. I'm talking about a profound humanizing tendency, a humanistic project, an atheistic humanism, as Louis Dupree calls it. So our morality has become completely imminent, this worldly. Why am I here? To aid others, to be a better person, to leave behind me a legacy. This is such a common moralizing narrative that we have today that we can scarcely draw into question, scarcely knowing that there was a period before this when this kind of morality did not hold sway. The third tendency might seem a little bit more unclear, and it has to do with the sense of mystery. So here's Turner once more. A third dimension of God, the mysterious Lord of heaven who struck human beings with awe and humility, was much diminished as believers shifted the main focus of their concern from God's transcendence of earthly things to his compatibility with humanity, its wants, its aspirations, its ways of understanding. What remained of awe before divine mystery was transformed into reverence for its surrogates as nature, art, and humanity itself. So we need to draw out 2 points there. Firstly, we have by and large lost a sensitivity to mystery. As the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be said is not the eternal Tao. The way that can be named is not the eternal way. In many mystical accounts, human conceptions are vastly outstripped by an openness that transcends such conceptions. And that transcendence of human conceptions is actually the point of various mysticisms or various spiritual paths. What we see in Western style modernity, however, is an attempt to shoehorn more and more aspects of life into something that can be conceptualized and therefore understood in human terms. This is precisely what happened to God. Did God flee the scene? Or did we continue to conceptualize God in human terms to such an extent that our idea of God, our concept of God became unconvincing? Is it that God is otios? Or is it that we've constructed or projected from the point of view of the mind a kind of conceptual God that no longer fits with our understanding of Western modernity? So much for the first point. So the possibility, as a René Guénon would say, that there is an intellectus, an inner faculty of the heart that's able to apprehend the divine, the universal principle, leaves the scene. And we're left with an analytic, rationalizing, humanizing, conceptualizing pattern. This is where we find ourselves. The second point comes to various surrogates, as he mentions. One of those is the reverence that many moderns now have, or postmoderns if you prefer, for nature. I'm not saying that many people are nature mystics, but I am suggesting that there's a certain worshipful reverence that one is experiencing when one is connected to or in the presence of nature. You can think of the poetry of Mary Oliver, if you've come across it. However, that account of the worshipful or reverential stance taken toward nature, I want to argue, is simply insufficient from the point of view of meaning. A mountain, or in perhaps some more Western style astrological ways, the universe or providential universe that has my back is simply not sufficient. It's vague. The notions come and go. There is no doctrinal weight as there is in more traditional forms of religious understanding. Now, at the end, I'm not actually making a case for a full-scale return to traditional dualistic styles of faith or religion, though I do think that that is one option. And there are people who are converting to mainline Protestantism or traditional Catholicism or to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and I'm all for it. Rather, what I'm trying to suggest is that we've reached a fork in the road. Either it's the case that this atheistic humanism will continue apace, and as a result, we'll see symptomatically all kinds of suffering that will ensue. I'm suggesting this is a failed atheistic humanistic project. Or it's the case that there will be a return to a deeply religious impulse